Good evening. Per the open meeting laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we are being audio and video recorded this evening. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing, continuation of the 40B project, Village at Norfolk, at 7:15 p.m. It is now 7:15 p.m. And why don't we begin with our presentation. Bishop, who's going to... Chris, you're going to...
Mr. Chairman, Christopher Agostino, counsel for the applicant. I think it's always helpful to sort of recap where we've been in the past few hearings and what's occurred since the last hearing. As you recall, we had an initial hearing on this application back in March where we discussed the applicant's preliminary plans, received some initial feedback. Since then, we've continued to refine the plan and had a few subsequent hearings. When on the hearing at May 24th, we received some additional feedback from the board indicating that there were greater concerns in the board's mind and amongst other town officials and consultants regarding the overall density of the project site. And it was suggested that the board had grave concerns about the idea that the site was, simply being overburdened by the proposal. At the same time, we also heard from both the applicant's engineer and the board's peer review consultant that the project was constructible as proposed. So we had to sort of reconcile those two issues, and the applicant indicated that the project simply did not work with this proposed product at anything less than the 32 units that the applicant was proposing. So with that said, we had scheduled a work session on June 5th to sort of articulate that general concern about overburdening of the site and what that really meant. So it's always appropriate to recap what was discussed during the work session, during the public hearing, and I think town council can also fill in the blanks. But in trying to drill down on what exactly overburdening the site meant, some of the concerns that were raised is the idea that there was not much in the way of open space on the project site. I think the applicant stressed that this project was designed with the idea that it was near the town center, it was near other open space associated with the town center, it was near public transportation, therefore open space on the project site itself was not necessarily a critical concern in that there was other open space available. But nevertheless, that was a concern that was raised. Again, the idea of the turnaround towards the rear of the project site was also discussed as a concern. The number of retaining walls on the site was discussed as a concern. The houses that were proposed at the entrance to the project site were discussed as a concern. In addition to that, just the general presentation didn't give the board and its consultants and other town officials a feeling for what exactly the project site was going to actually look like once constructed. It's always difficult when you're looking at a site utility plan and a grading sheet and a layout sheet and preliminary infrastructure plans to get a feel for what the site's actually going to look like and really see that there may be adequate open space on the site, but you can't get the feel of that from these preliminary plans. So one of the things that was requested is potentially to see whether or not we could go forward and do more of a three-dimensional flyover to give the town and the board a better opportunity to see exactly what it is we're proposing. At that hearing, it was further stressed that the applicant's proposal is for the 32 units. And the applicant gave some very preliminary indication of the economics of this development for the housing type that was proposed. And preliminarily, back of the napkin calculations just showed that we cannot proceed with anything less than the 32 units with this type of building type. and I think it was discussed that there are mechanisms within the law that allow the board to explore how that works. But before we get there, we left that meeting with the idea that the applicant was going to go back to its plans and work with the design team to try to address those concerns that I just gave in bullet point form that break down what it meant generally that the board thought the site was being overburdened. So with that, the applicant then submitted revised plans last week that, or earlier, that maintained the 32 unit count. But one of the things that we did was combined a few of the units into multi-unit buildings, move some of the units from the front of the site towards the rear of the site, and also combine them in multi-unit buildings in order to open up some of that open space that the board was looking for in order to reduce this idea that the project site was being overburdened. And this new plan, as you will see, and we have the landscape architect here tonight and the project engineer here tonight to describe that plan, opens up open space on the project site. Open space at the front of the site, you'll see that there is now only one building near the project entrance, so you actually have approximately 125 feet between the road there and the first structure. Also, we've opened up open space towards the rear of the site where there's been repeated concern about that dead-end road. So we also re-engaged with the landscape architect to add additional design features to the overall layout in order to give the board and the board's consultants a better look at the look and feel of the project site to really capture that open space that we've created. So even though we've maintained the 32 unit count, which as we've described is critical for the applicant's proposal, we were able to reconfigure the layout in order to address all of those concerns that were sort of articulated in that one word of overburdening the project site. And we'd like to get some feedback on this plan. However, as we've indicated at the last hearing, as we indicated to the board and the board's consultants on numerous occasions, for this building type to work without going towards a multi-story type product or another product that doesn't include this idea of single-family homes, this is the unit count that we need. We've already come down some. Now we're going to these multi-unit buildings in order to open up some of the open space that has been requested. But if this isn't going to work, then there is a procedure for us to drill down on the idea as to why it won't work from an economic standpoint. And then if the board is ultimately inclined to not go in that direction, then obviously there are appropriate remedies, but we feel as though that when we were presented with this idea of overburdening the project site, and then we drilled down on what exactly does it mean to overburden, and actually got those bullet points articulated for us, we think that this plan addresses those bullet points and resolves that idea of overburdening. So again, we have now taken feedback that we have heard during the public hearing and articulated with the board's peer review consultants, and again revised our plans. I would also note that the idea of overburdening was introduced several hearings into the development process. So the applicant at this point has reconfigured the project site now, I think, 3 times. And that's not necessarily a problem, but I want to reiterate the applicant's commitment to get this right for the applicant's needs and for the town's needs for what is a unique project site adjacent to mass transit in a town village that Norfolk has here developing, that we all want to see developed right for everyone's needs. So With that said, I think I'm going to turn it over to the project lead designer, Jim Pavlik, just to give a little bit more detail as to how exactly we've created some of this open space on the project site and move things around in order to address those concerns that were packed into that idea of overburdening. So with that, Jim?
Jim, before you start, Dan, did you want to add anything?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I just have one question. I heard you say we did come down some. Wasn't the original application for 32?
Jim?
36.
It was originally 36, which was recited in the mass housing approval was 36.
I don't have the mass letter.
Thank you. So my name is Jim Pavlik with Outback Engineering, and as Chris has been indicating, we have made some changes to the plan, some more major and some minor improvements to reduce some of the impacts on the adjacent properties, as well as to provide additional green space. So I just wanted to go through that with you. And the first handout is just reduced copies of the landscape rendering that you just saw up on the screen. And can we go back to that?
Do we have any extra copies that abutters might look at?
That's all I brought.
Yeah, you can bring it to the others.
We might have a couple.
Did you folks like to see one of these?
Oh, it's 3. It's 2 for this one.
Two for that.
Oh, you know that. So they added a unit here, shoved this down here, and then made 3 buildings and 3 buildings. Okay.
And I pulled back 2 from
Pull
here.
back 2 from there.
So I'll go over some of the more major differences in this plan versus the prior version. And one of those is we have a triplex building here and a triplex building at this location. You'll note the overall road layout still appears the same. We have the primary entrance road, the main looped road, and then we have this cul-de-sac. So again, some of the major changes were to combine units into a threeplex here and here. We also shortened up this cul-de-sac. Cul-de-sac was originally in this location. We shortened it up about 100 feet to provide more green space back here. There was also 3 units on this side of the road previously, which we've removed. So that's now going to be green space. And the other major change was to remove 2 units along the frontage of Rockwood Road here. So this first home is approximately 123 feet set back from the property line now. Previously, the first home was probably on the order of 30 feet or so. So that allows for a significant amount of green space and buffering from Rockwood Road. Some other subtle changes we made were to take the entrance road and to shift it further to the north about 5 feet. So it just reduces or increases the setback to this side property line. And primarily those are the major changes, I would say. We went through and revised all of the site plans accordingly, and we've submitted or have a drainage report and a response letter to Beta Engineering's May 24th, or it was the May 19th comment letter. Yeah, so that's the response letter, a supplemental drainage report, which is based on this new layout, and the revised site plans. You had also requested the May 11th version of the plans, so there's a set there also.
Are those dated today, or are these today's responses?
We
Yes.
haven't seen these yet, right?
No.
So should I go make copies of them?
I'd like a copy personally, but
Was that a copy of the drainage reports?
There's a drainage report and,
So what's the date on the new drainage report?
June 20.
Yeah, we should all have copies of those, Annie, please. Well, first of all, how many pages are
The
there?
drainage report is large.
All right. Do we have that electronically?
I will send it electronically.
Yeah, why don't you send the drainage report electronically? What else do you need?
I think at least the response letter. We all
Should have a response letter tonight. Yeah, the response letter we can look at. Drainage report you can send to us electronically.
The machine is out of this paper now, the 11 by 17. So I have to go to my office, unlock it, go.
That would be a hard copy anyways, that black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll
think
just do
that's-
the letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, I want to hear from Tom Ryan, who's here, regarding the landscape layout.
Sure.
Yeah, I think Tom can take a second. But before I hand it over to Tom, Jim sells himself short a little bit sometimes, and the amount of effort that goes into reconfiguring not just the units, but all of the underlying infrastructure to support the units really requires additional effort that really doesn't appear in just this site layout plan. So in moving these around, we've also moved around septic system locations, the leaching fields in certain locations, some of the drainage infrastructure, and the underlying support systems as well. So just all that's shown in the plan set that was submitted. I know we had the meeting on June 5th, and all that work ensued over the next couple of weeks. So we sent in plans last week, and I think you have the complete set for the engineer's subsequent review available just by submission tonight. So that's that submission that you just received, and the associated drainage report as well.
Thank
Great. With that, I'll turn it over to the landscape architect, Tom Ryan.
Let's see, as Jim pointed out, the plan leaves us with more open space out here in Rockwood. Part of the landscape development here will be some rain gardens that we're going to use for pre-treatment of stormwater, in addition to the landscape out along Rockwood. So we'll have a very different landscape character than we had in the previous plan. It'll be much more of landscape and open space than it was in the previous plan, where we had buildings much closer to the road. We have tightened things up in the center of the project, which will allow us with the two triplexes and the units in the center to have a more compact plan, and one that will have intensive landscaping in and around the center, which allows us to have a more open areas here on the perimeter of the project. We have the open space over here, which will give an open field, a place for people to get out and use, in addition to the open space here and the open space here. So we have a better distribution of open spaces throughout the project. The things I showed last time in terms of the typical yards in each of these units will remain the same. We also have individual yards for the units at the perimeter with fenced yards that will also be landscaped. So the plans from a landscape standpoint is very, very similar, except with the addition of these open spaces here and here and here, which will reduce the density on the outside and then increase it somewhat in the center. Any questions?
If I may ask a question, at the last meeting you said, I believe you said that you were going to replace the existing trees that you were going to cut down. Have you provided a table summarizing how you're going to replace the caliper inches?
We weren't replacing them one for one. These are the trees we're planting, and we really don't have a count on the survey of what we are taking out. So we weren't replacing one to one, we're alpha to alpha.
So with regards to that previous comment, how are you, I guess I don't quite understand how you're replacing all the existing trees
We're
on
not
site.
replacing all the existing trees.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Here, Joe.
You identified there was some additional work, open space on your way towards the cul-de-sac, towards the MBTA site, right? The other ones, those are all kind of now private yards back there?
Back here, they're private yards, but this is not.
Oh, okay, so, right. So you had said that was open space back there, that's just private yards
Yeah,
still?
it's private yards,
Oh, okay.
yes.
Right, and then the center area is also open space for the,
Yes, there is. There's a
Just-
path network that goes through here.
and just smaller private yards associated with those houses?
Well, the private yards are only on the sides
Right.
here, so it's a common open space in the center, and all the front entrances to the buildings and front porches all are on this green here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is there a landscaping plan sheet that was submitted tonight?
No, just this plan.
That would be part
But
of
we
the
don't have a
final-
copy of that, do we?
Yeah, that plan was submitted, just that one plan. It's not part of the engineer package, it's just submitted as a separate landscaping plan.
Oh, this thing?
Yes,
Yes.
that's it.
Yeah, but there's no details in terms of species and things like that.
No, they're not.
That would be part of the final.
So, yeah, just, actually, I'll follow up on that. So, Attorney Hill, I think one of the things that we were indicating tonight, and we also mentioned earlier, is that once we try to drill down a little bit more as to whether or not this is even something that resolves that quote-unquote overburdening concern, then we can drill down on the details and potentially get into things like a comprehensive presentation plan, a flyover plan potentially, if we really have resolved some of those concerns. If we haven't really resolved the major concerns that go into that word overburdening, then the details really don't matter. I think the fact that we have gone to great lengths with a landscape design architect for a project of this type at this preliminary stage shows our commitment to getting it right in terms of the landscaping and a comprehensive design that's going to make it work. And we are committed to that if this plan is what we want to drill down on the details for. So preliminarily, this is what we're describing, but we can get into the actual enumeration of particular species and number of trees, et cetera, if we're going in the right direction.
All right, so what I'm hearing is that you'd like the board to give you some feedback on this layout, and then if the board is favorable to the layout, then you would provide a subsequent set of plans that would provide more detail.
Yes, we would get into that additional presentation.
Okay.
But not the final set.
Yeah, right.
Well, there's, yeah.
You know what I mean.
Right, we can give an enumeration of exactly what species we're proposing, number, and drill down on that, if we're going in the right direction.
Okay, I got it. Well, I've got the floor. Just, so this plan that Jim gave us just now, this is a drainage map that provides the drainage areas. Do you have this in 11 by 17 that you can give us?
I can provide PDFs, sure.
Okay.
I don't have it.
You don't have an
tonight,
idea?
no.
Okay. I think it would be helpful if you would kind of walk us through the changes to the detention basins, because I see there are some rain garden features that weren't on there before, right?
Sure.
And I think that's useful. I think one of the things that we had asked for was more of a low-impact development technique influence in the project, and I see you've added some of those features. I think you should tell us about that.
Okay, sure.
Okay, yeah, Jim, why don't you go for that?
Amy, could you bring up the utility plan? Sheet 3.
You have the sheet that Jim is going to be referring to? In the packet that Amy gave you, 11 by 17? It's in your packet.
Site plans.
Yeah, so it's the sheet that says preliminary utility plan. Correct. I don't see a sheet number, but,
I think it's the third one in,
She's looking
This one here.
for-
Yep. Yeah, sheet 4 of 10.
page 3.
I think it's 4 of 10.
So, the rain gardens that we were referring to are located at the entrance here, and in between these two buildings here. So it's going to be a landscape feature. I don't know that it'll necessarily be noticeable from Rockwood Road, but essentially it's capturing runoff from this front yard area, and it'll be infiltrated into the ground there. It's also capturing some of the roadway runoff. So the overall drainage configuration is fairly similar to before. We're incorporating still a number of underground leaching beds. That's these large rectangular areas into the roadway. Cul-de-sac here. But overall, we were able to reduce the impervious area somewhat. We shortened up the cul-de-sac. So there's a slight reduction in the overall impervious area and an increase in lawn or wooded area by, again, shortening up the cul-de-sac, providing more open space here where there were homes previously, and providing more green space in this location. So those were the two areas where we incorporated rain gardens.
and with respect to the septic systems, am I correct that your reserve areas are not, they're separate reserve areas, are not between the trenches of the primary? Is that right?
Well, we're showing right now two different types of septic systems. We have standard leaching trenches in this area, so there are reserve areas in between those trenches.
Okay.
And then in the central courtyard area, we have two Presby leaching pipe systems. So that's this main rectangular area, and then we're required to have separate reserve area that's standard leaching trenches. So there's three systems like that, one here, another one here, and this one here.
Are those three Presby, okay, are all three of those Presby?
Yes.
And is that an alternative technology system?
No, it's approved for general.
It's general now? Okay. And that system that's closest to the Coyne property and the Gross property, isn't that the area where you had the highest level of groundwater?
It was.
So are you going to have to mound that, or is that going to be
Yes.
flat?
We're providing a retaining wall along the lot lines at this location.
How high is the mound going to be?
I think it was on the order of 4 to 5 feet.
Have we looked at the septic on this project? Yes. No.
And we haven't seen the revised plans anyway, until now, so.
Does the Board of Health have any, are you asking for waivers from any Board of Health regulations on septic?
It's been a while since I reviewed the Board of Health regs, so off the top of my head, I can't recall. I know the Board of Health had changed some of its regulations in the last couple of years, and one of the things was to allow this typical type of reserve trench area in between regular trenches.
We may need to amend that reg will be passed, I'm sure.
Okay, so that's something we should pay attention to if we need to have somebody look at the septic design.
If we need it.
Yep. All right. Okay.
Okay, just a couple comments. I really like the direction you've taken this project. I think it's a big step forward in terms of reducing the feel and the layout. In particular, I like the entrance where we're at 125 feet versus, I think 25 feet before you see any buildings. You reduce density over here, you reduce density in several areas. So, generally speaking, I like what you've done a lot here. So my feedback is very positive. I do have one question. There was some talk in the workshop that the planning department in the town may be looking at reusing Kids Place as a potential senior park. They might spruce it up in the future. And I know there's a road that kind of touches your property. Is there any reason, or could you use that road as an emergency exit entrance onto the site right next to Kids Place? That was something that we had discussed, and I don't see that here. Is there some reason that you did not include that?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was one element. Generally, we had discussed just the cul-de-sac emergency egress from that rear portion of the site. And yes, several different variations were kicked around. And I know we've already shown, I think this is the third iteration of what we're looking to do at the rear of the site. One of the things to point out is that now we've shortened the cul-de-sac and we're looking at 6 units back there. And so we feel, and I think, as I indicated at the previous hearing, that standing alone without any formal access, we would be proposing an arrangement back there that would pass muster in terms of safety. However, that being said, as you've pointed out, there are potential egresses or areas that could be used for egress in an emergency. And I think to your point, yes, the answer is yes. We could, in an emergency, use any practical access that's available back there through the parking lot that's existing or otherwise. And in an emergency, you can't have a trespass. So if an emergency did occur, we wouldn't need any formal grant of rights or formal easement or formal license because it's an emergency. In an emergency, trespass is forgiven. But again, I think standing alone, since we've shortened the cul-de-sac, we're now only serving 6 houses back there. I think our configuration is where it needs to be. But yes, that's definitely something, as you pointed out, that we could continue to consider if there are lingering concerns about emergency egress, or if there are concerns about the length of the cul-de-sac, which I think was reiterated as a concern during the work session,
Right.
which is why we've shortened the length in this iteration.
And hypothetically, if we were to have an emergency road back there, how would that change the layout of those 6 units on the cul-de-sac, or would it?
If we had a formal grant of emergency egress, well, I think we could theoretically just move 32 and 31. No, not necessarily. I mean,
We could actually access off of the cul-de-sac.
yeah, you could come right off of that cul-de-sac.
Right here.
Yeah.
You could just put a gate.
We'll put a gate in the fence, we're gonna place a fence here, we'll just put a gate here that will access the parking.
And again, that, if there is the practical possibility of emergency access, us just leaving a gate at the property line would be sufficient, and emergency vehicles or emergency personnel would find the way. If there was a blockage within the project site and they couldn't reach those 6 units at the rear, yes, that is a possibility. There would be minimal reconfiguration other than just showing a gate there.
Does any paving have to be done from your property line out to the parking lot at Kids Place?
Well, I mean, again, we have the right to pave on our property, so yes, we could pave all the way to the property line and leave the gate right on the property line, and whatever is available for access beyond that for emergency purposes, we could leave that as it is for our proposal. But if the town were to decide to grant us permission, we would we would pave whatever the town wants us to pave back there.
I mean, this board can't grant you the
Right.
use of that area. Have you considered going to the selectmen and talking to them about this?
Well, I think, again, we're still working the configuration at the rear of the project site. I think now that we only have 6 units and we have a cul-de-sac that is shorter by 100 feet, the general concern about safety and dead-end length should be mitigated to some extent. So we'll continue that conversation, but it's definitely something that's still in flux. I think the idea of just leaving a gate there goes a long way. If we were to approach the selectmen and they were to see fit to further increase potential or safety in the event of a potential emergency, then that's fine. But I think what I'm trying to stress is that we likely have achieved that in this design, but we're going to look forward to more feedback, and we'll see where it takes us.
All right, so the bottom line is, if we go down that road, it doesn't require a major redesign of the buildings or anything like that. It'll stay just the way it is.
Correct.
And there could be an access point if necessary. But at this point, it doesn't seem like it's necessary. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, other questions from the board?
I have a question. Have you performed a turning analysis for a fire truck on the cul-de-sac?
On the prior iteration we have, did we put the turning analysis on this new cul-de-sac yet?
It's the same.
It's the same design, so yes, yep. It's the same cul-de-sac, so we have those turning analysis. It's in the traffic report that's in the file, the first traffic report.
Chris?
It would be the Green International
No
report.
questions, yeah.
Okay. Joe? Don? Questions?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
I believe there was a couple outstanding items from the traffic issues, and I think you guys submitted a report or a response. Beta was looking for a more detailed site distance plan. Their last comment was it was incorrect or inaccurate or something, and have you guys submitted a new one?
Yes, I'll turn it over to Green International for that. We did submit an updated traffic response to those additional concerns from Beta. It's dated June 16th, and it does include a more detailed, updated site distance plan, stopping site distance and intersection site distance that resolves the concerns that were raised. We also did additional speed testing out on Rockwood, and I'll turn it over to Green International to give a breakdown of some of those responses.
Is this the plan that you're referring to?
Is that the June 26th? Or June 16th?
Yeah, there's a plan.
Yes, that's the plan.
It's really hard. It's so small, I can barely read it.
Amy, we could bring that up. That plan is one of the graphics that I brought this evening.
Do you have a plan sheet? 2x3 plan sheet? Or?
No. So it's that, what was submitted with memo was an 11x17, and then the graphics that we brought this evening. No, not that one. It was the ZBA meeting graphics. I think the second page of this file. Yeah. So again, a little background. The first set of peer review comments that we received from Beta Group asked us to collect some additional speed data, and they suggested collecting some additional data with the floating car method. I spoke briefly about that last meeting, but since then we've gone back out. We've put down on Rockwood Road an automatic traffic recorder. So we collected traffic volumes, speeds for a full 24 hours to get the most recent speed data. And actually, if you flip back to the previous graphic, just for reference, I know the text on this is a little bit small, but this is the project site here at 25 Rockwood. The railroad tracks, the roundabout in the center of town, now slightly off screen. So this is, this is great. This is the project driveway. We mentioned that the location of the ATR where we first collected traffic volumes and speeds was farther north of the site drive, and that's actually at this line here, approximately 425 feet north of the driveway. And as the board may recall, the 85th percentile speeds there were 37 miles an hour in both directions. We had discussed how the speed drops from, the posted speed limit drops from 35 to 25 as you head into town, and therefore in the vicinity of the site drive, vehicles on Rockwood Road would be traveling slower. This is the location of the second ATR that we did, much closer to the proposed site drive. And based on that data that were collected, the 85th percentile speeds in the northbound direction were found to be 33 miles an hour and 32 miles an hour in the southbound direction. So 4 to 5 miles an hour lower than the initial findings up here. And that's generally consistent and confirms our expectations and just knowledge of the area as folks are slowing down into town. So I'm going through all that speed data as that really provides the basis of the updated site distance plan. So now if we flip back to the second sheet. All right, so this graphic here is the same graphic and the same figure that was provided in our June 16th letter. Just for a little clarity, I've highlighted the two site triangles in yellow, which there's a lot of line work going on in this plan, so I think the yellow helps to visualize what the site triangles are. So looking north of the site drive, in this direction here, we're showing a site distance of 250 feet, which actually meets the minimum requirements for 35 miles an hour. And as we just talked about, I think what was the southbound was 32 miles an hour. Another point that Beta had made was that there was an error in terms of the object height on the road with the profile. A stopping site distance is a site from a 3.5 foot above the road, a driver eye height, to an object that's 2 feet high. However, intersection site distance, which is more critical for drivers exiting the driveway, is AASHTO defines that as 3.5 feet above the road to an object 3.5 feet above the road. The way that we had it drawn, and granted it was a small oversight there, it was actually a little conservative. Basically, if you can see an object that's 2 feet above the road, you'll be able to see an object 3.5 feet above the road from actually an even farther distance. That said, these profiles are now corrected, and both the driver's eye height at the driveway, I'm looking at this backwards. Yeah, the driveway here, and 3.5 feet above the proposed grade of the driveway, to a point 3.5 feet above the existing grade of the roadway there. And as you can see, there are no vertical obstructions there. We've been working closely with Jim and the folks at Outback in terms of where any proposed walls are going to be and things of that nature to ensure that they're either low enough or set far enough back so that nothing would be obstructing the site distance looking to and from the north.
So what's the minimum required site distance going north? 250?
250 is the minimum required for vehicles traveling at 35 miles an hour. We now have documented that the southbound 85th percentile speed is 32 miles an hour, less than the 35.
Okay, and you're providing 250?
Yes.
And that's the stopping site distance or the intersection site distance?
That's the intersection site distance from the driveway looking to the north. Now, the minimum required intersection site distance is equal to the stopping site distance for drivers on Rockwood Road. But this clear site triangle is showing the intersection site distance set 15 feet back from the edge of the road.
The minimum required site distance for stopping is the same as intersection? I thought intersection was higher.
The desirable intersection site distance is higher,
And what's
but the
that?
minimum required is is the same as the stopping sight distance, and that's clearly defined
Right.
in the AASHTO Green Book.
I got it. But what's the desirable minimum intersection sight distance?
That was in our original report. So just give me a sec, I can dig that up.
Well, it must have gone down because now you're at 35 rather than 41, right?
The desirable intersection sight distance is 390
For what speed?
for 35 miles an hour.
And do you provide that distance or no?
No, we do provide the minimum distance required for safety.
So you provide 250, but not you say 390?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what you provide? Is it just 250 or is it something higher than 250?
I think in both cases, looking north and south, what we're showing is the minimum sight triangle, the minimum distances that are required. I think the distances are a little bit beyond that.
But you didn't calculate that?
It's a lot of it depends. It's hard to measure in the field today because there's going to be some clearing in the area of the site driveway, things like that. I think with the curve in the roadway, the sight distance to and from the north is not much beyond the 250, the minimum that's required. Looking to the south, and we haven't talked about that yet, we're showing a sight triangle of 230 feet, and that gets you to about Ware Drive, Ware Road is in, just north of the tracks. And there I think the sight distance is clearly, the available sight distance is clearly beyond that minimum 230. Again, we're showing these minimum sight triangles as the required area where there cannot be obstructions or things like that. Landscaping in those triangles.
All right.
Going north where your yellow stops, it looks like you're right in the Droulet trees right there. Can you see where you are, the house where your yellow, yeah, come this way, come south,
This way
right?
here?
Yeah, right there. Are you, it shows an existing retaining wall and those trees are right there.
There may need to be
How
some.
do you say there's no vertical obstructions? Looking at it, it appears as if there is vertical obstructions right there.
The wall is behind the site triangle and not within the site triangle. There may need to be some trimming of those trees. Those trees are within the public right-of-way, so that is something that could be done. But the trees themselves are not within that site triangle.
Okay, and the stone wall is not within the site triangle either?
Correct.
Are the utility poles within that site triangle?
There may be some utility poles in that site triangle. That's generally acceptable because you'll be able to see a vehicle both before and immediately after, and it blocks such a narrow field of view within that site triangle. And that situation exists basically everywhere because very few locations have underground utilities.
Tim, did you have a question?
I do have a question. When they did their most recent speed data, why are they using the speed data up towards the center of town and not the one they use at the telephone pole right next to the house? Or do you have the speed data from the radar done in the driveway that you took in the rain? The day after you had the accident?
Does someone from the team want to answer that question?
Sure. The data that we're using is the ATR data, and that's the most reliable and comprehensive data. We were curious, and we went out there with the speed gun, and we measured a few speeds, but that's not nearly as comprehensive because it's a generally short time period. The ATR data is sort of the industry accepted comprehensive method to measure speed as it gets every single car traveling along Rockwood.
Do you have numbers on what the speed gun?
Not with me. I think it was similar, but I don't have that data with me. And again, it was for a short time period mostly because we wanted to get that out there. We were curious, but we ultimately decided we wanted to have the most comprehensive and best data available to present to the board.
Mike, how long was the ATR done?
Excuse me?
How long was the ATR done? How long was the ATR done? How long the period?
It was a 24-hour count.
All right.
On
On one particular day? Just
Yes,
one?
on Wednesday, May 31st.
Why did you select that location to put the ATR strip? What was the thinking behind that? Why didn't you put the ATR strip right at the driveway?
We were out there, there's certain requirements, and in terms of the speeds that we wanted, in terms of the area that we were looking for, in the vicinity of the site drive, that seemed to be the best location. There's, in terms of, there's a little solar panel, and it needs to be well lit, and there's all sorts of requirements for the actual data collection and the technical requirements for that equipment.
Again, the ATR is the black strips in the road, correct? There was another set across the road before the driveway at the pole. And they're using the data where you slow down for the tracks.
Did you guys put an ATR strip where he's saying?
We only put out one ATR.
No, previously, I think he
No,
said.
no, no. There were two sets. This last time, there were two sets. One before the pole and one after the pole. Down by the road.
I believe, Jason, and correct me if I'm wrong, the prior data was further up in this, north in this map, right?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about?
No.
Can you point on the plan where it was?
I know I saw two strips out there recently.
There was one set of strips here and there was another set of strips down here.
That's the data. That's it, right?
No, only one of those ATRs were ours.
Or somebody else's?
I don't know. I mean, I only have one set of data.
So you guys did not put a strip where he said there was a strip, is that right?
That's correct.
That should be the ideal strip. Going across the road there. You're coming down 115 on the blind corner at the speed. If it's 35 miles an hour and they need 300 plus feet, they don't have it without going over my property. Because if they're saying they're going outside of the stone wall and they're back 14 and a half feet or 15 feet from down here, you've got to cross my property. There's no way you can see around the corner. It's 5 feet behind that telephone pole. So if I put a truck in the driveway, I put a fence up, I put trees, anything on the corner that they can't see around the corner.
He is right.
I'm not trying to stop your little development. I'm just pointing out the issue. If
So-
the board would like to-
Yeah.
If the board would like to line up in cars and do 25 cars out of that driveway in any length of time, separating them for an hour, good luck to you. I want to see you all take a left-hand turn for an hour. We don't need a train. We'll just do
So,
it.
Mis-
Take the time.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, this was submitted on June 16th, and it's still subject to Beta's peer review. There are applicable standards that Beta is going to look at. Beta is going to look at where the test data was collected from and determine whether or not they're comfortable with the data and the results. So, I think I would just ask that, we'll give our presentation, describe what we did, present it to the board, and then the board's peer review consultant will have a chance to respond to this. We've heard the concern expressed. If there are any other concerns expressed, we'll continue to hear them, and we can pass those along to the board's peer review consultant. And then we'll get an answer at the outset. So I'll let Jason continue with just the additional findings that we'll present. The board can ask questions, abutters can ask questions, and then obviously we'll get the results of the peer review.
I think that's logical. Next step is Beta's peer review for the traffic study. Correct?
As well as for the other elements that have been modified, yeah.
Okay.
Mike, would there, and I don't know if the answer is this, and Beta may have an answer, is would there be an opportunity to do another ACH or ATR at the site? I mean, one of my concerns has been on this always is, we pick a time when baseball you know, I don't know, I know it's 24 hours, but you got baseball going on, you have schools getting out. It's your largest amount of traffic in this area, the largest concentration of traffic in this area, you pick that day or that week, is this end of May, beginning of June in Norfolk. I would be very interested to see if you did a test strip next week, with school being out, with baseball being almost over, what the speeds really are, as opposed to at an optimal time when traffic is at its slowest. And I don't know if that's a possibility, but I'd be very interested to see if that makes a difference. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know the cost of one of these tests.
That's not the point. We use.
Amy, could you flip back to the first sheet here with the aerial photo?
I think we should do another test.
Again, just for some context in the discussion on where these speeds were measured and what speed we're using here. The measured speed up here, 250 feet south of the school driveway, 425 feet north of our proposed driveway, was 37 miles an hour.
So that's the speed that was used, not the lowest speed.
The measured speed here in the southbound direction was 32 miles an hour. That's consistent with our general expectations of traffic slowing down as they get towards the center. The site triangle that we have meets the requirements for 35 miles an hour. Again, we don't have the data right here at that exact point, but it's generally understood that traffic is going slower as it approaches town center, and we now have the data, 2 data points to back that up. And the 35 miles an hour, yes, it's between the 32 and the 37. Generally, I think we stand by our findings that we have sufficient safe site distance at the site driveway.
So, Chris, your concern is that when this data was collected, it's during a period of time where traffic is slower than usual?
Peak slow traffic.
Because the schools
Schools
open.
are doing a lot more activities,
Okay.
a lot more baseball is going on. So they say speeds are slowing going from the center of town, going towards the center of town. I would say speeds are slow because they're coming out of the busiest school in the area, the Freeman Kennedy School, which is that entrance right down by where you're doing your study is, and speeds haven't picked up yet. At this one particular point in time when you're doing your study, you measure it next week, and I would bet you that you'll find the speeds are a lot greater because you don't have people entering and exiting that school as much as you would during May 31st or June 1st in that time frame. So I think you're measuring a much slower speed than you would in normal traffic periods,
So that,
which would change your sight distance as well, which is what, again.
Sure, I certainly hear what you're saying. As a general industry practice, traffic data are usually not collected during summer time periods. Traffic volumes are generally a lot lower in terms of vacations and things like that. And I know I would have assumed Beta certainly would have picked up on that if we had collected data during a summer period, as that's usually not a desirable time period. The other point I'd like to make is that we've got over 700 feet between the latest ATR and the school driveway. And while the traffic volumes may be higher with people going to and from the school, I don't think school traffic is going to significantly influence speeds in the area of the site drive because it is far enough away.
So one way to deal with this is not necessarily have them go out and put ATR strips out again, but to do a sort of a sensitivity analysis. And it would be helpful to know how far north is your actual site distance. Is it 270? Is it 300? And then correlate that to what speed that would be. So that way we would know if you have, let's say, 350 feet, what speed is that? Is that 45 miles an hour? And if it's 45 miles an hour, then that might give us some comfort that cars really aren't going that fast, and we don't have to go back out and collect the data. Do you know what I mean? Like if you can actually tell us what your actual sight distance is in both directions, that might resolve this question. And that's, you should be able to do that, I would think, fairly simply, because you've already gone out and you've taken the measurements in the field.
Yeah, I think we can provide that type of sensitivity analysis. I think it makes sense to know what the actual is, just for the sake of knowing. I think what it comes down to from our perspective and what Jason submitted in the June 16 report is that we meet the standards. Green's analysis is in compliance with industry standards for the testing procedures, the methodologies used. We'll wait to hear back from Beta. If Beta finds an issue, we'll address the issue. But I think we will provide the additional information to the board to give the board an additional comfort level, given some of the characteristics of this particular area with the school, with the town center. We'll get that information. But I think at the end of the day, from our perspective, it comes down to the idea we meet the requirements. The line that's used in these types of settings is that very few roads in the Northeast, in Boston, in these types of old neighborhoods actually meet the required distances, let alone the desired distances. So in putting in a new development, we try to come up to the standards that you see down in Florida, where the roads are nice and wide and the signs are big, and our 84-year-old grandmothers can get around just fine in their cars without not seeing a car coming down the road. But we meet those standards as far as the required standards, and that's what we're required to do. So we'll see if Beta comes back with any deficiencies or further suggestions, and we will provide the additional information.
Okay, good. Tim, did you have another comment?
This is where your test is. This is where your driveway is. Somewhere right here, I believe, is where the existing driveway is. The road changes to 25 miles an hour right there. That's where the sign is. You can't see this sign until you pass this driveway.
Jim, do you want me to continue to comment on that? I think the idea that Jason just described and what we're talking about is, I think at this point, I think we just have to get you what we actually have, and we'll correlate it. I think the point we're trying to make is we have the distance for a much higher speed.
You don't have safe distance.
Yes, we do.
We do. That's what
You do not.
the data show that. The data shows we meet.
I've been driving the road for 35 years. I've been hit in my own driveway. Pulling into my own driveway, I've been rear-ended by a car and shoved up against that pole.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's best just to...
All right, let's move on with
have
the...
Beta make their comments.
All right.
And also, Mike,
Tim, thank you for your comments, and let's see what Beta comes back with on their peer review.
But you're gonna give us the southern element. You didn't do that yet.
Can you go back to the next page?
The second page?
Yes. Maybe just scroll down so we can see the bottom half of it. Yeah, perfect. All right, so the site triangle looking to and from the south. Here, again, this site triangle is the minimum required clear distance. We're showing 230 feet, which is what's needed for 33 miles an hour, which is the documented 85th percentile speed in the northbound direction. And in this direction, I think the site drive will be clear, again, for clearly visible for a distance beyond that 230 feet. I think it's clearly visible from the tracks, just from being out there and our own experience. And this is Ware Road, right this location here. So again, we meet the safe stopping site distance and intersection site distance requirements for the documented 85th percentile travel speeds.
So same question as before. Do you meet the desirable intersection site distance in that direction?
No, we do not meet the desirable. We meet the minimum required.
Do you know what it is?
Not offhand. Our report had initially used the 25 miles an hour posted speed, and that's what's in the table here. And for 33 miles an hour, rather than the posted 25, it would be higher. So I don't have that information yet.
When you give us the other data, can you give that to us as well?
Absolutely.
And what about that picket fence that's there? Is that not in the way?
No, that's not. The height of the picket fence is shown here on the profile, and the sight line is above that.
Excuse me. There's been some discussion about a sidewalk going towards the commuter rail after the excavation to put that sidewalk in, how might that affect the sightlines?
If anything, the sidewalk in this area that is proposed as part of this project would improve the sight lines in that area if it's an open, clear space beyond the edge of the roadway.
There were no walls, retaining walls, or that were going to be added with that sidewalk?
No, not aware.
Is there a sidewalk going in the opposite direction, away from the train line? And would a sidewalk help with the sight lines? For the same reasons that you just stated, it would widen that area and make it more visible.
I'm not sure, where are you referring to now?
Going in front of Tim's house, is there currently a sidewalk there?
On his side of the road, no, it's on the opposite side.
Okay. That won't work.
You have a hand up, Mike. Left.
Yes, sir.
Chris Henry, 30 Boardman Street. Chris Henry, 30 Boardman Street. So I know there was some discussion during the last traffic study that a turn out of that towards the center of town, towards the train tracks, required turning into the oncoming traffic to a certain degree. Does that affect the sight line distance at all?
No, the truck turning maneuvers out of the driveway don't really influence the available sight distance.
I meant the requirement, like the fact that you're crossing into oncoming traffic. Does that require a further sight distance, or does the sight distance stay the same regardless of what lane you're in?
No, it's the same minimum sight distance requirement.
We should talk about what the
And we meet the minimums, but not the desired.
Yes.
I have other questions about the inside, but I think that we're only discussing the outside right now.
I'm still caught up on this utility pole. It's on both the north and south side of the driveway. Because if that utility pole's on essentially the edge of your site view down the, excuse me, down the road, then I understand what you were saying before, how if it's in the middle of your sight line, you'll be able to see on either side of the utility pole, but if it's right on the edge of your sight view, then I disagree. I feel like you wouldn't be able to see on either side of the utility pole.
Is it in line of view?
It's easier to see it on this. So the utility pole, then you go to the next previous sheet. That's the utility pole right there.
Okay.
Another point I'd like to make is that these site triangles are 14.5 feet back from the edge of the road, which is consistent with AASHTO and how it's technically defined. In practice and in reality, people inch forward, and people, go, you might stop 16, 17 feet back, then you might stop 13 feet back. And as you move forward, your view around that pole is going to change.
But we're talking about the requirements. The requirement, what is the requirement? Is the requirement to be set back 14.5 feet from the edge of the road?
That's the requirement for intersection sight distance, and that's what's being shown on these plans.
I understand it's being shown on the plans, but the utility pole, it appears to be within your sight view in the yellow. But if the utility pole is on the edge of your view, 14.5 feet back, are you still able to meet the requirement from AASHTO that you have adequate sight distance?
I don't believe the utility pole is right at the edge of this sight triangle.
Do you have it shown on that plan?
Which pole are you referring to?
There's a pole to the north of the driveway, and it appears to be maybe 20 feet south of the driveway.
This pole here, is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, that's not right at the edge of the site triangle. It is within. You'll be able to see behind it and in front of it.
Okay, it's just hard to see because just when I envision that graphic, I see a white spot where that utility pole's blocking your view.
Again, I think it's typical industry practice to allow utility poles within site triangles.
I understand if it's within your site triangle, but if it's on the edge of your site triangle, which I just was having a hard time seeing on that drawing.
I think what he's telling you is it's not on the edge.
That's what I was trying to get to.
The question is, are these poles on the edge of the site triangle?
No.
Okay.
They're not. I understand there's a
I
lot
guess
of
that's
information
the
shown
long-winded answer to my question. They're inside of your
Yes, they are within
triangle.
side of the triangle.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I misunderstood what you were getting at.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions from the butters? Yes, sir.
So I wanted to say, first of all, I appreciate the new plans. I do think they are an improvement. I like that it's set back in the front and the back. So one of the questions that I had was regarding the last meeting that everybody was allowed to attend. There were some comments about driveway length. The hope was that they would be a little bit longer and pavement width within the development a little bit wider. Have there been any changes made to either of those dimensions?
The pavement width for the main roadway is still 22 feet wide. They're going to have Cape Cod berms on both sides for a total pavement width of 24 feet. And the driveways are all a minimum of 18 to 19 feet. Some are a little bit longer.
In some areas, there is curving and sidewalk, right?
Yes.
So it's not Cape Cod berm on both sides.
I apologize. The entrance road has a sidewalk on the right side, so that would have a vertical curb.
So there's a balance, and part of the concern is keeping impervious area to a minimum. So in widening the road, you're obviously increasing impervious area, which is a balancing act. You don't generally want to do that if you can avoid it. And at 22 feet with a Cape Cod berm on one side and with this road layout, we think the internal traffic will be safe.
So they're staying at the same dimensions that we talked about originally. I think it was Beta that said that they were hoping for those to be larger. So my next question is, the two locations that you designate as snow storage are both areas where the septic system is, and I don't believe that's allowed. So is there an alternate location for where snow storage would be contained?
Is that true? Well, certainly by increasing the amount of open spaces we've done, there is other areas. I don't know that we've...
Can you show those on the plan? Because the two that you designate on here are both areas that have septic.
Could we call up the site rendering, I guess?
When I look at the site, just given the placement of the homes and, the areas where the property boundaries are, I don't see a lot of give for that, particularly where I think it's unit 32 swings so far to the side. It would be nice if maybe that could be a triplex there as well to maybe accommodate some snow storage in the rear there. That would also provide some of that emergency access that Mr. Kaliz is so eager to give away that road.
Primarily, we have a septic system in this location.
That's what you show as your snow storage.
Yeah, so there's areas here as well as down here adjacent to that septic system area. So there's plenty of additional areas, and those would be areas that where the snow would be stockpiled, for instance, if...
Can you just point that out on the plan that shows the actual septic system so that we could see that? I mean,
Sure.
It does look like there's space there, but on the other plan, when I looked at it, it looked a lot tighter.
Sheet 4.
but it's reserved within the sections of the, in other words, there's also septic there as well, so they're in between the beds, correct?
No, I can describe that. So in this area, this is one of those Presby leaching fields.
Okay.
So that's the primary leaching area. And then these individual trenches are the reserve. So this area could actually, be wooded. Would have to clear for the septic system itself. And then all along here would be open green space. And then there's also areas here, areas up in here. And again, I think for the most part, during a snowstorm, we're going to be, the plows are going to be furrowing the snow along the roadway edges, and it would only be in those extreme storms when there might have to be some stockpiling of snow. It could also be trucked off-site.
I've been at home with no mic. It's not a good time to watch. So when you hire a private contractor, I assume, to remove the snow, are there signs that say snow removal here? Like, what happens in 5 years when you all are on to your next project? Because doesn't seem to be a lot of space, and the snow on the road has to be moved off the road.
So there are detailed plans that still need to be developed, and part of the site plans will be in a homeowners association document, and I believe in there they can also spell out certain requirements for snow removal procedures and things like that. So,
Would it be possible to provide a snow storage plan that shows where storage will be allowed, and maybe the potential for no snow dumping signs on site?
Sure, that'd be, again, part of the final developed set of plans that we would.
That can be part of our final order of conditions.
Order of conditions.
We can, fine tune that when we get to that.
Is it permissible to stockpile snow on top of a septic area, or is that frowned upon?
Not the primary area.
Hand up, Mike.
Another question.
Yes, sir.
Mike.
So I know that there had been several discussions with different members of the town. I was under the impression that the selectmen had sort of implied or said outright that they were not in favor of using or giving away the Kids Place Road as an access or paving it. Has that plan changed from your discussions this year?
I have not had any discussion about that at all.
So the selectmen are still on record as saying they're against giving that away, is that correct?
I don't know what their position is. We haven't talked to them.
How come we have not? I mean, you just seem very eager to see that access road. I would have thought that would have been something that you would have addressed with them.
That has to come from the applicant, not from the board. The applicant has to approach the selectmen and ask them if that's something that would be feasible, and they would come back to us.
Is that your intent?
No, I think, as I indicated earlier, we now have 6 homes.
Right.
6 single-family homes at the rear site. We've shortened the cul-de-sac. And again, in an emergency, if we leave a gate to practical access, in the unlikely event of an emergency, I think we're okay.
So it's not your intent?
It's not our intent. We don't think it's necessary for the 6 houses back there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The first septic system up there by Rockwood Road, is that a primer system or is it an overflow system? And what's the grade in relation to the street?
In that location, it's what we're proposing currently is individual leaching trenches. So you're seeing a combination of the primary and reserve trenches there. And the finished grade would be pretty much matching existing topography. We had fairly deep groundwater conditions there.
What else do we need to do? Architectural review?
If you want to. Can start looking at the waivers. At the road, that's
I
probably
mean,
3 feet below the
Beta
road.
does have a very good
They're on Rockwood Road, behind Rockwood Road.
architect
3 foot
who
stone wall that drops straight down.
Issues
And then
project,
escape with back.
106, 108,
100 feet up to
and
the
making
yard.
major changes. He'll be fine, that's what those
Yes.
Pretty much on the road.
He does a,
Yeah, so that would be filled a little bit.
So, build
I think we'll do a peer review for architecture.
in and runoff out,
I think we call
or
Just,
architecture on this,
from
and
the 2 existing houses on each
he
side.
looked at the relationship of the
So
open
both houses on each
space,
side
and the
are lower than
units,
that.
and the walkways, and what do you call it?
Site design?
Site design, yeah.
You raise the grade up there, what's gonna happen to both houses on each side?
the houses aren't lower than,
Yours. One house has a basement underground, my house has a basement semi-underground.
Site review.
Yes.
right, so we're going to be filling those depressions a little bit, but we are also providing those underground leaching chambers for the surface runoff, so that we have a rain garden and underground leaching chambers here to account for that runoff.
We're talking about the septic at the front. The Board of Health, right, has to approve the septic, right?
Yes, absolutely.
The board, has it been reviewed by the Board of Health yet?
It has not.
Right, yes, so it's got to go through a full Board of Health review.
Not at this time.
No, but it's going to go through a full Board of Health review, right? I mean,
Ultimately, yes.
They would reject it if it's incorrect.
Subject to that question that Ann had earlier about what local Board of Health requirements we're asking for a waiver on, and we'll articulate those once we, arrive at closer to what is the final plan. We'll confirm exactly what waivers. We're proposing to comply with the state Title V requirements.
But just to address that a little bit closely, I think the concern from the neighbor is that his basement foundation is at a lower elevation than where the bottom of the leaching field would be.
And the yard on the opposite side. Her basement is underground, and the water that would flow naturally now goes into the 2 depressions on each side of the driveway. And if you fill them in, I don't know where the water's going. It's gonna back up in her yard for sure, up towards the window.
Okay, so you aren't concerned about the sewage leaching?
I'm concerned about the sewage also if you raise it
Okay.
up to the road level, because it's certainly gonna break out. I mean, I don't know what that distance is to the sideline, but
Okay, so breakout is something the Board of Health would look at, and there are Title V standards with respect to that. If you're concerned about the septic elevation being higher than your basement, and then that somehow getting into your cellar, like that isn't necessarily governed by Title V, and that, I mean, there are setbacks in Title V. Septic systems have to be a certain distance from a foundation. But overall site design is something that we would look at, and that's something that we would ask Beta to weigh in on.
So it might be it's water flow he's concerned about. Water flowing off the new property if it gets raised onto their property.
Well, that's a drainage issue, and that's something that Beta can weigh in on.
But that's not something the Board of Health would weigh in. If, in other words, if you were building a septic that required you to elevate that septic, let's say 3 or 4 feet, which the Board of Health would not take in consideration the runoff of not the wastewater, but the rainwater runoff on that created septic system to the impact of neighboring yards?
And not usually. I mean, that's not,
Purview.
yes,
So
It's in our
Beta
purview.
gets a comment on
The
that.
surface runoff, the underground infiltration for stormwater would be element, and we have reviewed those, and we actually raised a similar question to the abutter about the potential for the leaching chambers close to the southern property line, 3 of them, well, actually 5, 1, 2A, 3, 4A, and 4, potential impacts of infiltrating the 100-year storm in that area, which is at a higher gradient than the abutting properties. And that was a question that we had raised, and I think it was something that we're going to coordinate with further investigation at some point during the final design.
And just to clarify your question about the buttery you were talking about had the full basement, was that the Goulet You talked about your basement
My
up.
basement is out of the ground partially, and the opposite house on the other side of the development is below ground. 19 is underground, mine is raised up.
We don't have numbers, so that would be Coin, the
Correct,
name?
Roulette, Coin and Roulette.
Oh.
Coin is the one in the ground with.
Okay, gotcha.
But just to go back to what you're saying about that concern that you raised, did they address that concern?
We've just gotten the plan, so I don't know.
Okay. Right.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure.
I had a, going further on that, I had a question about the drainage. Abutting the Norfolk Housing Authority property, they're proposing erecting it looks like a retaining wall where, previously, it looks like there was potential for water to run off from the Norfolk Housing Authority site, and now you're essentially building up your site. Can you explain further what happens to that runoff that was coming on your site before?
So just to that point, before Jim gets into it, and you can describe it generally, we had initially proposed to utilize some of the off-site drainage features, that basin near the train tracks there, but we revised the plan to attenuate all stormwater on the site through rain gardens, infiltration basins, etc. So the water there, the general drainage design that was submitted in the drainage report today accounts for that water being infiltrated, attenuated on-site. It doesn't drain off-site.
I'm not talking about the stormwater on-site right now. I'm talking about what's off-site and what currently drains onto your site and what happens to that water.
So Jim can
in the
describe
proposed
the
conditions.
overall flow of the project area.
So this is the retaining wall that you're referring to?
Yes.
And actually, what we're proposing here is a cut on our side of the site. So the road, starting at this end, is about a 1.5 foot high retaining wall, and it generally increases to the south to a maximum of 3.5 to 4 feet. So at this end, 1.5 and about a 4
Okay,
foot. cut.
so
It's a cut, so we're going to be lower. We're not
Okay.
filling and
Okay.
blocking flow.
Okay.
Handing a mic. The mic.
So you also show a retaining wall on the gross property side, that you had said there was going to be a 3 to 4 foot mounted system in that area. So you show a retaining wall there. Do we know what the elevation is on the opposite side of that retaining wall? In other words, you're going to be 4 feet on your side. It's obviously lower on the other side. What would be the full height of that wall? And will there be a fence on top of it in any areas that exceed that 3 foot height, including where it abuts the housing authority?
Generally, a fence is required if the retaining wall is over 4 foot high by the state building code. But I believe the entire perimeter of the site has a stockade fence around the edge. So that's around the entire perimeter. And
But that would still leave a 4 foot retaining wall with a 4 foot drop and a chain link fence to catch you. So my question is, should that chain link fence be on top? It's on, because it's shown behind the wall on the plan. At least on this plan that I have.
can we go to the rendering, Amy, please?
Chain picket fence and it's behind the wall.
What side are you referring to?
The one on the plan is showing on the housing authority. So as you,
Yeah, no, I see it.
so the chain link is on the opposite side of the retaining wall. So my question is, if we have a retaining wall on this side, what is the elevation from the neighbor's side? In other words, I understand it's 4 feet on this side, but the neighbor said this is a lower property. So if you add that height, what is the height there?
Use the microphone.
The fence should be on this side, on the high side of the, over here, this is higher than the road over here, so the fence is at the top of the wall on this, along this retaining wall.
The retaining wall and then fence, and the grade moves up, is that what you're saying?
So this is high, you hit fence first, then retaining wall, and that's low.
And then it tapers down, okay.
And then it tapers down. Over here, this is high, that's low, the fence is on top of the retaining wall. So in
What's
all,
the height of that drop on the other side?
where, here?
Nope,
Here?
correct.
I think that's what, about 3 feet, Jim? Do you recall?
I want to say it was a 4 to 5 foot high wall.
Okay.
4 to 5 foot wall,
Wall.
and is that with the measurement from your grade
From
or?
existing grade.
So just so I'm clear, so from not the height that you're gonna bring the grade up to, but from the existing grade? So in other words, are we 4 feet and then 4 feet, or for a total of 8 on the other side, or 4 feet to her grade?
It's,
Yeah, so the existing grade,
On the abutters
described
property?
here. Right, so if this is the existing grid,
Yep.
the top of the retaining wall would be here,
Okay,
and the lawn would be flat
okay,
on the houses.
That's what I'm
So
looking
we'll
for.
have a fence on top of that retaining
perfect,
wall.
thank you.
And then on the southern portion of the property abutting the railway right-of-way, how do you plan to construct a retaining wall tight against the property line? How deep do you have to excavate for the retaining wall?
We haven't done the detailed design yet on that retaining wall, but we are seeking a license from the MBTA.
Oh, you are?
To construct the wall. So it's a temporary construction easement, essentially.
Would that be a condition of approval?
How long does it take to get the permit from the MBTA?
I really don't know. I've never done this before. We filed for it, they answered us, then we paid their fee. Now they're saying within 90 days we should have it.
Consistent, a few months, 60 to 90 days for MassDOT.
All right. Any further questions?
It shows like a mixture of board-type fence it describes and a section of chain link fence. Can you just show of the section that abuts, that would be visible from the downtown, is that the board fence or is that the chain link fence?
which section?
I guess the side that faces the MBTA tracks and the downtown. Is that a board vinyl fencing similar to what you used at the Boyd Crossing, or is that a chain link fence? And what is the height of that fence?
Let's see, I don't recall, you're talking about this area right here?
I'm talking that whole strip along that side where you abut the train tracks. We talked about
mean,
fencing that's...
From here to there, that
well,
zone.
I thought it continued all the way to the back. Is that not what it shows on the plan?
Well, there is fencing the whole perimeter of the property, all the way around, but it
That's what
follows
I'm
the
asking.
property line.
What type of fencing?
Stockade.
So the same type that you used over there, the vinyl? Okay. And what's the height of that? The same 6 feet?
And while we're on the retaining walls, also the retaining wall abutting the Gross property, that one's also on your plans, it's 4 feet high. I don't see any existing topography beyond the stone wall. But kind of the same question, how do you propose to build that retaining wall, excuse me, tied up against the property line again?
That location, we're actually set back a couple of feet from the property line, so that's sufficient to allow the construction of that wall. There are precast or stone retaining walls.
How deep into the ground do those have to go?
As little as 6 inches, depending on the design.
Would it be possible to provide a detail or something to to show us that.
Final set of plans, all of those details.
Yeah, a lot of that's governed by building projects.
I just want to ensure that it'll be on the applicant's property.
You have an opportunity to view the final set of plans, so all that information would be on the final set of plans. And the board, as well as the peer review, not only review these plans, but will also review the final set of plans and all of those details.
This board cannot permit a trespass, so you cannot authorize us to go on the neighbor's property to do anything, which is why we've identified that often, so that we would have sufficient room to construct the wall. At some point, there's going to be a final detail of that wall, that's a final design.
That's what I'm trying to understand is going forward, how it's going to work.
And that will be on the final set of plans.
If I'm not mistaken,
Well, further review by the board and your peer reviewers.
if I'm not mistaken, at the workshop that we had on June 5th, I think we asked you guys, have you spoken to these abutters? And have you shown them these plans, and did they have any concerns or comments?
I am in discussion with the abutter about this work that we're proposing, and I have shown him this plan. And those discussions really stopped until we know which direction we'll go. Now that we know that this might be acceptable, I will resume the discussion with the abutter.
But these retaining walls have always been on the plan, so
He's aware of them. We don't have any plans to encroach on his property at this point.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we set it off 2 feet off of his property, to make sure that we're not gonna.
Is that both gross and coin?
Sorry?
Is it both the gross and the coin property? Are you talking about?
This is gross property. The coin property, we don't have any retaining walls or anything. But we are going to be placing a fence on her property, between us and her, on our property.
That dark line behind the coin property, that's not a wall?
There is a retaining wall.
Yeah.
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Yes, there is a wall.
Okay. So have we heard from those two neighbors? I don't think they've been here, right?
Yes. This is not coin anymore. I did meet with her, and I did explain to her that there will be a wall, and I have an agreement with her to place a landscape on this property, on her side of the fence, here and here. And she was present at the very first meeting.
Is her property lower or higher?
No, it's about the same level. It is the same.
But after the wall, it would be lower?
After the wall, it would be lower.
Okay. So you're gonna put landscaping on her property to hide the wall? Is that the point? Or?
The point is, we're gonna have a fence here, and just to beautify her side, and we're gonna do that on this side and this side. She, unfortunately, when she purchased the property, her property, not long ago, a few months ago, less than a year ago, somebody told her she has a lot of trees on our property, and somebody told her that those trees are on her property. So we're, and she, very nice lady. We're gonna take out those trees because they're on our property. So to ease her pain a little bit, I promised her that I will be planting trees after we place the fence on both sides. I'll be planting trees, and we've counted how many trees, and she and I have an agreement what's happening with over there.
I would recommend that be part of the landscape plan, that we
Sure.
see at the next iteration, because I think that's pretty important.
I'm
Even though
happy to
she's
do
not
that.
here, you know.
It's an agreement, it sounds, so that's good.
Yeah.
I'm happy to share that agreement with you.
I noticed the septic show here.
Mhm.
Okay. How come they don't show the
We've covered
septic on
everything so
these,
far.
on this one?
Yes, okay.
I missed one chance to say it, Mike.
This thing?
Before we jump back
Septic system.
inside the
Yeah, what about
property.
here?
It was brought up by Tim about the,
No, it's concerned, he's upgrading.
Emily Holt.
I am concerned about that.
Thank you.
getting back to the
Not
25
concerned about
mile per hour
is
sign that's
again-
out there. It sounds like there's something that we should be talking to the DPW about in terms of,
You have
is it
one leaching
being
chamber
obstructed?
here.
Or is placement maybe just not as appropriate as it could be? Because that is contributing to traffic that will
could
likely
be
slow down through here. I mean,
This
I
one
don't know
is
if the future
definitely
holds for
lower.
traffic controls throughout this part of Rockland Road,
All of these
but the fact is, we have some
radiate
controls out there, like a
surface
25 mile
right
per
down
hour
that
sign,
direction.
and if it's just a matter of it's not being
So-
seen properly, it just might be
We
something we
are
can also
conducting
contribute to the benefit of this.
looking at
It's the benefit of actually everybody who's here.
I
elevations
totally
of
agree.
Each of these systems.
Okay,
Just
seeing
about
no other
surface
hands.
elevation of the yard.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a potential for that to be injected and the water hydrology to
Is there
increase the
any-
flow?
I love that you've worked really hard. I do appreciate that, and you have been through a lot through this whole process. Is there any way in these green spaces that you can save some of those tall pines that exist, or you're gonna have to just clear cut to do the building, because it's a more efficient way to do that? Is there a way to save some of the vegetation that exists on the lot where you're keeping it green space? Because I do think that the people of Norfolk are not prepared for what's going to happen to this property when all of those trees are cut down. So I know you don't need to answer me tonight, but is there a way to save the existing vegetation in any way? Thank you.
We will take a look at it. We'll endeavor to do that. My experience with the trees that are done the problem, it's not the matter. It's not a matter of saving money, because we always have somebody who want to put a tree, who want to remove a tree or two here and there.
Yeah.
The problem is every time we attempt to do that, whatever, we're gonna take a look at it and see if we can do that. But whatever clearing we've done around the trees, those trees are used to other trees protecting them from the wind and from
They don't survive as well.
they don't survive, and the problem is they form a danger. And we've had situations where after we've done that, 2 years afterwards, a tree falls on a house and it causes a problem. So this is the balancing act that we always try to. But we'll take a look at it, and the topography, and if there is something we can do. I'm reluctant to save the biggest trees because they form the biggest danger. But if we can save some medium-sized trees that don't form a danger to the neighborhood, to the future residents, we'll attempt to do that.
The smaller ones, the oaks and the beeches and things that have grown up underneath, those are the better candidates.
Yeah, instead of those big tall pines.
And maybe more in terms of at your eye level, maintaining that wooded
Yeah.
vegetation than the telephone poles would be.
Right, perfect, yeah. So just, if you could take a look at doing it safely and maintaining that look.
I think in the reserve areas of the septic, where we're not being up actively, we can take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone. I think for our next meeting, which will be held on 7/19, we'll be expecting a peer review on the traffic from Beta, and also, excuse me?
Also the drainage, right? The one, the drainage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have to review the latest iteration.
There have been
Yes,
revisions that we need to review.
and also the last project that Bishop did with us, we had Glenn do an architectural site review. I'd like to get Glenn to take a look at these plans, and I think those will be the next and final steps in terms of peer review. Okay, so
Mr. Chairman, before we close out tonight, I think I heard, and I just kind of would like to maybe summarize some of the things I heard and then find out if I'm hearing things correctly or if I'm not, just because we've been through a few iterations at this point. I think I've heard some feedback that abutters and the board are appreciative of some of the changes that are depicted in this plan, and that generally speaking, we may have addressed that concern that was summarized in that word, overburdening. With the additional open space, are we correct in understanding that we may have mitigated that overburdening concern generally, and that we should feel comfortable in maybe continuing to refine this particular layout at this time as we go forward? Just before we start to refine some of the details on this plan, I figured maybe a little additional feedback from the board would be helpful for the development team.
I think, and I'll let everyone speak, I think the board is in a position now where we feel comfortable with this layout, and we like the effort that you've put in to reduce the feeling of congestion. We particularly like the front entrance. We particularly like this area over big green areas that you've added on that left side and in the front. So I think you're at a point now where you can take your next big step in terms of refining this layout. The layout is good. Unless I hear differently, I'm going to assume that the board is going to give you the green light to work with this layout.
Great. I know Bisher, Jim, Tom, and the team and Jason have worked hard on it. We've been through a few iterations, so I'm glad we're going in the right direction at this point, and we'll continue to work hard on it.
Okay.
Do you want to ask them about the off-site mitigation sidewalk?
You mean going up? Go ahead and ask Dan. That's fine.
At a prior meeting, you guys had explored the possibility of constructing a sidewalk from the project entrance down Rockwood towards the train station. Do you have any detail on what you're proposing at this point?
Amy, could you go to sheet 3 or 4, I think? Probably shows the sidewalk most clearly. Oh, sheet 3.
It's here.
See it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's the sidewalk shown. It's the red hatched area along Rockwood. And actually this 1, 2, 3 driveways. And there's an existing crosswalk with a sidewalk right here, right before the tracks. So we would be connecting, actually there's a handicap ramp right there at that property line. So that red hatched area shows the proposed sidewalk. In terms of the detail,
Is there an actual sidewalk on the bridge? I thought it was just a...
there's no bridge here.
Sidewalk begins right at where his sidewalk is ending. There is actually
is a
a sidewalk
sidewalk?
that begins.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a sidewalk on the east side of Rockwood, crosswalk on a cross Ware Drive, and a crosswalk on Rockwood right here. So we're tying in right at this.
Do you have a
location.
detail sheet for that sidewalk that you're proposing to construct?
It'd be up to the board's discretion, but I think we would probably propose a paved sidewalk with Cape Cod berm or a vertical berm of some sort. It's up to the board's discretion, I
Town
think.
sometimes requires between the road and the sidewalk, some sort of a looming and seating.
I think we'll defer to the DPW for guidance on that.
There's some rules they usually apply.
I would say there's not sufficient room to put in a grass strip.
Right, but like I said, I'll let DPW comment on that, because they usually talk to the talk to the developers about what sidewalks can be
We'll
implemented.
contact DPW.
Okay, can you communicate with Bob McGee about that?
I think it would be, I think you ought to provide a detail sheet
We will.
on what this is going to look like to us, and to the DPW, and then we'll have them review it and give us the feedback.
Okay.
Where will that utility pole and guy wire be in relation to the sidewalk? The one we were talking about previously during the traffic discussion.
I believe that utility pole is to the north, right?
There's one to the south.
There is one.
I believe there's a utility pole and one or two signs south of that driveway. I'm just wondering where those are in relation to
There is
the
definitely
proposed
one
sidewalk.
between our driveway and what we're proposing. We will not be responsible for removing it. Working with the utility company to remove a pole is a lot worse than a root canal. So we will be happy to build a sidewalk, but wherever the pole falls, we're not going to change it. I can't do that. I simply don't have the ability to do that. Especially on a public road, heavily traffic. With heavy traffic, there's no way.
How much of the property in front of the, where the sidewalk is being discussed, how much of the property belongs to the town there? Do we know? Doesn't sound like a lot. But in terms of, we're talking now sidewalk, is that, how much property from the road to?
It varies,
Right.
it's not consistent.
Right.
So it varies from about 5 to,
I'm going to just guess 8 feet or more.
Oh, right.
We
But-
will
so that the-
survey it,
yeah.
locate everything, and
Right.
then propose.
Yeah, then there's any, address the pole whatever way, but like, talk to DPW. Meander, I know, the meander, I know.
Just so we have time to have this reviewed before the July 19th, how much time do you need to prepare that information to get it to us?
Okay, if you would please give us a list of the information that you would like to get. Are you talking about the sidewalk?
Yeah, well, for the sidewalk, we need a detail sheet, maybe a survey showing where it's going to be. And then we talked about, I think the traffic engineer is going to provide some additional data to us.
How much time do you need?
Would like to wait until Beta has had a chance to review our latest letter before we provide that?
No, I think you should provide it now so they can see that at the same time as they're reviewing your...
Yeah, the first week of July probably. So.
First week of July.
But Beta doesn't need to hold off on their review. What I was going to suggest is...
I'm not suggesting that, I don't want to
understand.
delay getting the information.
Yeah,
that's
I
all.
understand.
Yeah.
So what I was going to suggest is between now and the next meeting, is that hopefully Beta can review whatever's been submitted to date, and that the two engineers can talk to each other between meetings to resolve any outstanding issues prior to the next meeting. And we'll submit whatever we need to submit within the first week of July.
By the 7th of July, we will get you the complete, more clear layout and design for the sidewalk, survey and located. I will communicate with DPW, see what their wishes are, and I'll communicate with our team, and we'll do your plan. We'll do the sensitivity analysis and anything else.
I think there was some concerns with the mounding, the questions with regard to the mounding along that property line at Coins, or what we're calling Coin property. I think the height of that, you were going to check on the mounding of that as well, correct, Jim?
road grades.
Right, for the property by that, the Coin property there, yeah, right over there. I think you were going to check on the mounding issue there.
You mean the...
Septic,
grading?
the septic mound issue.
No, that was
There'd be a
the-
raised
that was the
system
other
right
side.
there.
Septic here? Oh.
Yes.
Septic here is not raised at all. Septic
The one correctly right there.
here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he was going to check on that. That was one of the things we were going to check on as well, right?
Groundwater mounting?
No, the mounding, yeah, because you have a raised system there.
Elevation.
Okay. we can provide-
You said you were going to check with the Board of Health with regard to the current requirements?
In terms of any waivers, or?
Yes.
that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, we can provide an updated waiver
Okay.
list, absolutely.
That's a good idea. If we can get an updated waiver list by the 7th, then we can start reviewing that.
Now that we know we're going in this direction, we'll prepare a waiver list that addresses this proposal.
Right. I would anticipate on the 19th that we would start going through the waivers. So, and we would have Beta, we'd have the traffic Beta guy, we'd have UBAC or Bill, and then that would be the agenda, I think, is...
Yellow shirts are green.
Can I just ask one curious question? What are these three little buildings
I
right
think it
here?
might be, yeah. I think it's fine.
that match
I haven't been
some
a person
houses?
over
Are they
there.
carports?
Don't tell him.
I think he says. Not sure about that.
A, B, and C?
Detached garages.
Oh,
These are three-car garages.
okay.
Three one-car,
Similar to Boys Landing.
three one-car garages.
If you notice, the driveways are smaller on units 17, 21, and 20. And so these are their parking garages because their driveways are half the size of the other garages.
Okay, thank you.
What are the lengths of the shorter driveway? Do we know?
The width. The length is all 18 and 19. So these are the width.
It's just the width that's affected?
Right.
Okay.
So they can only fit one car instead of two? Okay, all right.
Thank you.
I'll be in it.
Okay, Chris?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to continue the public hearing for 25 Walkwood Road, the Village at 25 Rockwood Road till 7/19 at 7:15 PM.
Second.
All in favor, any discussion?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you.
Take a minute and update the board on Boyd's Crossing.
Sure.
Regarding
Actually, I don't think he's with green. I think he's with hope. I think the guy in yellow is without back.
We had a workshop last night for the affordable units at Boyd's Crossing held here at Town Hall. And we've done an awful lot of marketing and to attract as many buyers as possible, and we're halfway through the lottery process. And at this stage in the workshop, we typically would have, we'd be fortunate to have 5, 6, 7, 8 people. Last time, that's 21 people.
Wow.
Wow.
It was well received, and we had a person there to discuss first-time home buyer financing programs and grant programs, and we had Dawn from my office did the presentation, and it was really interesting.
Yeah, that's tremendous. Yeah, thank you for the update. That's good to hear.
Do we make more of the units affordable?
All right, thank you, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you.
Abutters and interested people. Okey-dokey. Thank you.
At 7 o'clock on the next?
7:15.
7:15.
Mr. Chairman, I noticed at our next meetings that we have our Rockwood scheduled meeting, open hearing at 9:20, and our deadline to close is 9:17. Is that just procedural? We just ask for an extension for 3 days? We'll do that further down the line.
Yes, exactly. Okay, let's,
Have to deliberate. We approve minutes next?
why don't we get the deliberation out of the way for
Okay.
56 Priscilla? All right, so we are dealing with 56 Priscilla Ave. This was a variance request
Correct.
for a proposed garage. Let's begin with some findings of fact.
Here we have a 24 by 20 garage being built, or being asked to be built. 22 feet high. It is 5 feet from the right property line.
Property line.
Appears to be 16.5 feet from the existing septic tank.
I had
I had
5 feet.
5.9.
I had 5.9, 5 feet 9 inches from the existing septic tank.
I think that's a leaching field.
Is that
It's
the
hard to
leaching
tell.
field?
It says existing septic, so.
You're talking about the tank.
The
first.
tank
Yeah,
is 16.5, the
Oh, okay.
leaching field is
Leaching-
5 feet
Okay, you're
high
right, you're right. 5.9, 5 feet 9 inches from the leaching.
in the leaching bed.
Okay.
The variance is just for the setback associated with the 5 feet, right? Meaning
again?
it's only one side
Correct.
setback we're talking about,
Correct.
right? Okay.
He's, the only reason for the variance is
Right.
for the right side.
Okay.
And did the applicant not mention that they were open to moving, was it the tank or was it the leaching field?
The chamber system. Willing to move the chamber system, but that still didn't give them, I think it gave them an additional 10 feet. Yeah, that would have given them 10 feet, so they're still 15 feet. 10 feet encroachment into the setback.
Right.
I know that the nearest butter, I believe, to the right of the proposed garage is 130 feet away.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And the rear setback is 18 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yep, it's on the table.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Any other pertinent information that we took in for the hearing that would fall into the findings of fact?
About the comments? About the comments in terms of findings of fact.
Yeah, what were the better comments, Joe?
I think the butter was against the garage being built. is
That's
what
correct.
he
In terms
mentioned.
of, he owns properties that are adjoining.
Right.
So the question is, he's concerned about the areas for the setbacks.
Correct.
I believe it was just one about had the comment. I don't remember any other about it.
That was it.
That was it.
It was Wayne Sunquist at 50 Priscilla. Okay. I think that's it for finding the facts.
Is the lot itself non-conforming?
The lot is a non-conforming lot.
Non-conforming lot, okay.
Yep.
Another finding of fact is that there will be no living quarters on the second floor for the proposed building. Mr. Sundquist stated that he had not been notified of this proposal and was not happy with it. Unfortunately, it's too late for that. Yeah.
Can answer some of those questions.
Yeah, we'd be breaking the
Understood.
protocol, unfortunately. It'd be considered taking additional testimony. We can't do that.
Is there any other place to put this garage that would be less?
Intrusive. Yeah. We looked at that. I believe we looked at that, and the problem is that the septic field takes up a big chunk of backyard.
Usually we enter into finding of facts, Mike, the questionnaire filled out for the variance, the conditions, the reasons why.
We have that? We have that.
Yeah.
I don't personally have the copy of it.
No.
And so let's go through the worksheet. Criteria. We've done the finding of facts. The variance must be with respect to particular land or structures. The Norfolk zoning bylaw do not allow variances for uses or activities not otherwise permitted in the district in which the land or structure is located. Number 2, there must be circumstances relating to soil condition, shape, or topography, land or structures, and especially affecting such land or structures, but not zoning district in which it is located. Circumstances: the lot is pre-existing, non-conforming to the current zoning bylaws, and it is also 25% smaller. The existing septic tank and leach field are in the middle of the lot, along with the existing house. The topography of the lot is sloping towards the rear of the lot. Number 3, literal enforcement of the provisions of the bylaw would involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, to the petitioner or appellant. The enforcement of the current zoning bylaws would require the relocation of the septic system that was replaced in 2013. No new structure would comply with the current zoning anywhere on the lot. Relocating the septic system is, extremely expensive. Desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially degrading from the intent or purpose of such bylaw. Relief would be to make it possible to construct an accessory structure so that the homeowners can get typical use of the property. Detriment would be, no detriment would be created. This is a residential neighborhood and there are other garages in the area. Is it substantial? No substantial detriment exists. This print is small, Chris.
They tried to put it in.
As the
one line.
proposed structure is attractively designed and will enhance the property and the neighborhood in general.
You're just getting old, Mike. That's
I
all.
am getting old.
You're just getting
My eyes are getting tired.
They are.
Okay, so those are the, that's the
Criteria.
appendix and criteria that the applicant submitted.
As far as precedents, in terms of having approved something like this, garages that close to the property, I don't recall having approved a garage
No.
in this type of a situation.
We actually just had one in the property on Boardman Street.
Right, but we didn't approve it.
We did not.
We did not, we
Correct,
denied
right.
it.
Exactly, and I'm saying, this is why I'm bringing up,
Yes.
like, I don't recall approving,
No.
you know, setting a precedence of being able to do that.
No, we have not.
Okay.
All right, so in order to grant a variance, there are three criteria. We just went through the criteria, but the one criteria in particular that would affect this request the most is number 2, that there are circumstances relating to the soil conditions, shape, or topography of such land or structures, and especially affecting such land or structures, but not affecting generally the zoning district, which means one of those three circumstances, soil conditions, shape, or topography, we would have to use one of those three circumstances to grant the variance.
Well,
So
Soil conditions is out.
soil conditions, there's nothing wrong with the soil conditions. The shape of the lot is pretty symmetrical.
Just a quick question.
And the,
Quick question, if soil conditions include whether there's a septic system in the soil?
No, soil conditions would be, for example, the swimming pool where we granted a
Ledge.
variance.
Ledge.
If there's ledge and the
Sand.
soil
But not-
conditions,
Not that, there's,
yeah, we're not going down into the soil at all. This is on the surface, so the soil conditions would not apply here. Shape of the lot, there's not, there are many lots in Norfolk this shape, and the topography is such that there's nothing
If it was really hilly.
really unusual about the topography that makes this lot the only
that
lot
one
like
over in
this.
Populatic Pond where the topography was
Right,
like
right.
this.
If this was the only lot like this in Norfolk where the topography was so unique, we might be able to use that as a criteria. So when we have a situation like this, and it doesn't meet any of these circumstances, granting a variance is next to impossible. The only other thing we can look at is the de minimis encroachment clause, which gives zoning boards across the Commonwealth some leeway. De minimis encroachment is designed to give ZBAs across the Commonwealth some flexibility. The 5-foot, the 20-foot encroachment is significant. De minimis encroachment would usually give us some leeway. If it was 2 or 3 feet into the setback, we might be able to say, okay, we can look the other way, but this is excessive and far exceeds our authority to use the de minimis encroachment argument. I can't, and unless other members of the board can find some other way to grant this variance, I'll look for other opinions. I think we need to have a motion.
I have just one question.
Sure.
What is the setback requirement for what is considered a attached garage, a temporary, a non-foundation construction, right? I'm trying to understand the requirement from the septic tank to this type of structure.
It wouldn't, that actually doesn't pertain to this one because it's usually if you have a basement.
That's
Where
okay,
this
that's
is
what I
a-
meant.
Where this will be a slab.
A
That-
slab
that would not
foundation.
be,
So
that
would
would
not-
not be,
not- okay.
not pertain. Mr.
Sorry,
Chairman, make a motion for a variance pursuant of MGL Chapter 40A, Section 10, as amended in Section F5A of the Norfolk zoning bylaws, to allow the construction of a 24 by 20 garage, which would be closer to the side and rear setback lines in the distance equal to the height of such accessory building. Property is located at 56 Priscilla Ave, Assessors Map 4, Block 13, Lot 28, in the R2 zoning district. This is a variance request, a motion to approve the variance.
Need
I
a
second.
Okay, any further discussion? All
I
right.
think the
Go
only
ahead.
further suggestion is, I think, as Joe pointed out, we have not approved any garages with this type of closeness to the property line. And we have actually not approved any variances for porches and other structures that violate the setback requirements outlined in our variance requirements in the town.
And we could not find any case law that would support this large an encroachment across the Commonwealth.
No, it's, the financial costs of moving septic systems or the financial costs are not, do not carry any weight in the case studies that have been reviewed.
Okay, without further discussion,
No.
no to grant,
No to grant.
No to grant.
no to grant.
No to grant.
Now, that's not what you wanted to hear. What you can do is appeal this decision. You can go to the town clerk. Once it's, our decision is registered, you can go to the town clerk, and she can give you that information on who to appeal it to. Yep, that's the best thing to do.
Guys are going to squeeze 32 houses on 7 acres, and I can't get a garage. Unbelievable.
Okay,
Now we have minutes.
all right, minutes.
Everybody had a chance to read them?
Say again?
Had a chance to read them? Did you have a chance?
Yeah, I
to
did. I
read
read
them?
them before. I actually was thought we were going to approve these much earlier.
Kevin, you had a chance to read them? Yeah. You had a chance to read them? You weren't here on May, were you?
No.
No, okay.
I attended the 24th.
That's it.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the minutes of the Zoning Board of Appeals of May 24th, 2017, as identified.
Second.
Any discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion to close? Make a motion to close?
Not yet.
Later.
One of the things we probably have to talk to Dan about is an extension form, if we don't have one. Do we have an extension form yet? Have we found
I
that?
don't have a form, no.
We should probably have Dan start drafting up a form, because we may need an extension on this 40B for 25 Rockwood Road, and have the form so he can get Fisher to sign it.
Oh.
Definitely need an extension because our meeting is scheduled 3 days later.
Yeah.
Oh, are we running,
We're into this section, yeah, because the deadline is the 17th, and we actually have a meeting scheduled for the 20th still, and we probably will not be done at the rate we're going, with the deadline being 9/17.
okay, deadline to close is the 17th.
But we probably want Dan to
Okay.
start putting something together.
All right.
And the other,
Can you contact Dan and ask him to do that for us?
and the other item is Bob Bullock has volunteered to sit with us, and I think he has to do it I think he has to do it at the meeting, not before the meeting, and just talk to us a little bit about some of these variances that are coming to us. And as a building commissioner and as the zoning enforcement agent, his reason for directing these people to our board. And I think it's a good idea. Some of them are going to be before we actually review them as a ZBA. Some are going to be when they're in violation after construction has started.
I think
Similar
that's
to,
standard in many towns.
it is, and we don't do it, but he has now volunteered to do it, and I said I think it's a very good idea. So I think I've mentioned to Amy that we should probably get him on the agenda for the next meeting, where we will be reviewing 2 Needham Street, which is a violation of our special permit. And,
Really?
yeah, yes.
Is 2 Needham Street on 7.5?
Currently it is, I think. I think, Amy, that is scheduled. I think the public notice does have it for 7/5.
And
he would do this in the future too, which I think is, as Don says, is probably a good idea.
2 Needham being the one on the,
Corner of Main and Needham Street.
across from Jim's house.
Yes,
The one that we approved.
yes. The porch violates the setbacks. Is it 7/5, is that right? Yes.
Does, all right, that's good. We'll
Okay.
discuss that. Does Bob want to talk to us about process? Is that what he wants to do?
I think more just to, I think process and also some of the times his understanding. One of his concerns is on some of these, I think, is, how do you put a front porch on? If you're gonna violate the setbacks of the front porch, how do we look at that? How do we look at a front porch? How do we look at a back set of steps? In other words, if the requirement is 25 feet and they do his front steps, does it encroach that? How do we handle that? How is he as a zoning commissioner looking at that?
So he's looking for guidance from us?
I think a little guidance and also to provide us what he's looking at.
Okay.
And so I think it's probably a good idea to at least try it and see if we can
Okay.
get a balance.
Is that like when he comes across a porch and it's in violation of the setbacks? Right, okay.
There was some discussions on the part of abutters for the meeting scheduled for the 5th for a larger facility. Did we look into that?
That's for Abbeville, right?
Abbeville, yeah, on the 5th.
I have booked the library.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh, thank you.
I would expect that, since it is holiday, a vacation week for a lot of people, that there would be less people.
Maybe.
But
Will there be comfy chairs?
I also booked August.
There won't be any
4th,
comfy
because
chairs, though.
That will be the traffic
Yeah.
discussion.
that'll be a big one.
Good. Plastic
I
chairs.
just booked all the rest of them over there. We can cancel what we need to.
Okay.
If the crowds get smaller.
Just to put it on the, we still have, being recorded, right?
Yes.
Okay, put it on the record. I'm trying to understand, there was discussion back when we first had the first open meeting relative to Abbeville. There was a discussion about the bridge and whether the bridge was structurally capable of supporting construction traffic to begin with. Whose responsibility is it to make an assessment of the bridge itself under its current conditions of use? And has that been done?
Yes, the applicant is currently working with the DPW. There's a grant that I believe the town has, I'm not going to speak for Bob McGee, but I think he does have one grant for bridge reconstruction. They're also looking at another grant to help for the reconstruction of the bridge. So there are things going on concerning the bridge with the DPW and the applicant right now. And I'm expecting that, I don't know if it'll be the next meeting or the meeting after that, the DPW director will come back with some information.
Because I
But
kind of got the...
but to Don's point, though, DPW should be, I don't know what the threshold is, but at some point, if a bridge isn't capable of handling a certain size truck, there should be a sign that says, limit, whatever the limit is, right? I don't see that, none of our bridges have, I think
And
that.
quite honestly, one of the abutters or one of the people in the audience asked, which I thought was a very good question. They said, shouldn't we understand the current capabilities of that bridge, and do we understand it? And my concern is that we're not moving ahead with this fast enough so that as we continue down the road with Abbeville Commons and the other one, that that's a big hanging which could become a very major item.
I can shed some light on this. On the site visit, I asked Mr. DePlacido, what's his number one concern? What's the biggest challenge to this project? And he said the bridge. And he said that will determine how quickly he can start the project. So he knows that the bridge is a problem. He knows that the bridge needs to be reconstructed, and that will delay starting his project potentially a whole year, depending on when the grant gets put in, whether we have a grant now, whether we have to wait for the grant. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, but he's well aware that that bridge needs to be rebuilt before the project is
Start moving
started.
some big cement trucks over that thing.
Right,
Yeah.
plus
Yeah.
technically
He
the
knows.
road itself too needs to be, it's not much of a road with proper edges.
That-
The edge
that-
is the lake.
The bridge, the road, that whole area
Right.
is his number one headache right now. And before he can start his project, those issues have to be
But
resolved.
just on a-
And they are being discussed outside of the purview of this board. That
But-
feedback will be given to us.
That's great. Just it's a great question to DPW in general, but if a bridge has no posting on it, is it assumed that a truck of a certain weight can just go across it? Like, meaning, like, do we assume cement trucks can go across these bridges because there's no sign on it? Or should our DPW be identifying bridges with some sort of a weight limit sign, which this bridge may qualify for such a limit? It's just an outside question, it should be asked of them.
Another question I have, relates to the village of Norfolk. Is there any discussion with the selectmen regarding the use of any type of emergency exit road back through the town property during the construction process of this development? And should that be initiated, whether it be by this board, or should it be initiated by the town or by the applicant? My point being is, building 32 homes in an area where we're already discussing a lot of concerns about traffic. I can't wait to hear the peer review that we have. But the actual construction process itself, where we're bringing large trucks in and out, that would be a way, hopefully, to minimize some of that traffic problem that will be there anyway. But certainly during the construction period, if we were to force that construction traffic out onto Boardman.
I think it's a great point. I wish I had thought of it when the applicant was here. I think that we should bring that up at the next meeting and ask them to go to the Board of Selectmen and ask them for permission to use that as a potential construction access to the site. I think it's excellent. They may feel that they don't need it. I don't know what their answer will be, but let's ask them that question. It makes sense.
Is there a reason why we have to wait till the next meeting, why we can't send a letter right now from this board to Bisher and say that, we would request that he do that or consider that so that we can start the ball rolling now versus waiting?
I don't think we can request it unless the peer review comes back and says that it's a problem.
I'd like to do that, have that conversation with abutters are here. I don't think it'd be fair for us to start down this road if none of the abutters are here to hear this.
You heard the one abutter, he thinks Mike is giving away the
Mike was in the room.
the Kids Place Road, which is not the case.
Right. No, I understand that. Right.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between having an emergency access, having an access that's not an emergency access, and also having a temporary access for a period of time.
But that also gets dicey, because if you remember, the road going into the Freeman Kennedy School was a temporary construction road. That, as we all know today, is the actual entrance to the Freeman Kennedy School. So it does open up a lot of Pandora's box. So
Don, I like your question a lot, but let's
It's a good
do it.
question, yeah.
Let's do it when everybody's here.
Okay.
make a motion to close the zoning board of appeals meeting of June 21st at 9:37 PM.
Any discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.